This is Tower Gateway, one of the western termini of the Docklands Light Railway. It's located just outside the historic City of London, a short distance from such landmarks as the Tower of London, Tower Bridge, and St Catherine Docks. It's one of the oldest stations on the DLR, and sees a lot of use, yet its days might well be numbered. One of the strangest things about Tower Gateway is that it's just a short walk from Tower Hill on the Underground and the National Rail station at Fenchurch Street, yet it doesn't offer direct interchange with either. And that is because this station was not the station the planners of the DLR really wanted. As I've mentioned before in previous videos, the Docklands Light Railway was built on a low budget. It was to cost no more than £77 million, or about the price of a round of drinks in the West End. Even accounting for inflation since the 1980s, it was very cheap. There were two conflicting schools of thought surrounding it. Successive governments believed that the declining Docklands didn't justify heavy transport investment, but the local authorities and residents believed it was essential to realising the area's potential. So the DLR was this bizarre hybrid, both high-tech and low-budget. This low budget is why Tower Gateway is what it is. In 1974, the Docklands Joint Committee produced a report on the possibility of a light railway through the docks, and this included a terminus at Tower Hill. The report suggested terminating either at Fenchurch Street or Tower Hill Underground Station. Guess again, said the people controlling the purse strings. The idea of a tube line was then played with, but in 1979 Norman Fowler, the new Minister for Transport, declared that this was not going to happen. In 1981, the London Docklands Development Corporation was formed, and later that year they produced another report. This again suggested a terminus around Tower Hill, either at Tower Hill itself or up at Aldgate East. Then things get interesting. The plan goes on to suggest that the light railway trains could then run onto the district line of the Underground. This was rejected due to capacity issues. The district already had an intensive service. There was no way they could slot however many more trains in. So the plan was revised down. The trains would no longer run onto the Underground. Tower Hill and Aldgate East would still be the likely termini, with the light railway terminating below the existing Underground stations. One suggestion that was played with was running the light railway along the street to Aldgate East as a tram, but that wouldn't be practical with driverless trains. A third potential terminus also found its way into the plan, at Minories. There had been a station at Minories between 1840 and 1853, but that was long gone. Minories became more and more attractive as a site. The light railway was to recycle existing infrastructure wherever possible, using the abandoned London and Blackwall railway viaducts. The trouble was, terminating at Tower Hill or Aldgate would require some serious engineering to get the line underground, and to cope with the crowds. But Minories was to be an elevated terminus on a level with Shadwell, Limehouse and the other stations along the route. The budget being what it was, the LDDC settled on Minories. The hope was that in the long run they could get closer to the financial centre of London, but for now, Minories was a good compromise. The viaducts the line would be built on had to be acquired from British Rail, who were happy to let the LDDC have them, with the exception of the busy approach into Fenchurch Street, which was very much still in use. So a new concrete section of viaduct would be built from Cannon Street Road to Minories. The new station was built in the same modular style as the other stations, albeit on a larger scale than most. It was an unusual L shape so as to better fit into the confines of the existing site. When it was built, there were two tracks with a single island platform. At some point before opening, the decision was taken to call the station Tower Gateway, which presumably was considered more glamorous than Minories. On the 31st of August 1987, Tower Gateway opened for business. But before the first trains had even begun running, wheels were in motion of a very different kind. A businessman named G. Ware Travelstead had this crazy idea to turn the area around Canary Wharf into a new business district. If this was to succeed, easy access to the city was needed. A terminus in the back streets with no interchange just wouldn't do, so pressure was applied to get the DLR a new terminus at Bank. Bank was not only in the heart of the city, but it had connections with 5 underground lines. Money was to be no object. You need a tunnel, build a tunnel. You need to rebuild the station, do it. Tower Gateway had barely come into service when tunnelling began on the new extension. In 1991, that extension opened. Demand for Tower Gateway went through the floor and never recovered. The station has seen changes over the years. In 1990, a new exit was built by Minories car park and a new staircase was added to the main entrance. But the biggest change came in 2008, when the station was completely rebuilt. Reopening in 2009, the layout was totally changed. Instead of one platform and two tracks, it was now two platforms and one track. One platform was for alighting passengers and one for boarding. This is known as the Spanish solution, having been devised for metro systems in Spain to make the flow of people quicker. Unfortunately, said people at Tower Gateway often ignore the signs and just use whichever platform they feel like. The rebuild reflected a sad truth. Tower Gateway just wasn't in demand as it had been. The majority of services now terminate at Bank, which sees 90% of DLR passengers, as compared to the Gateway. Only the service to Beckton runs from here. What of the future? Well, it's not looking good. The Mayor's Office released a paper in 2020 known as London Infrastructure 2050, which proposed closing the station altogether. The arguments for this were twofold. Firstly, Fenchurch Street was projected to become overcrowded by 2025, necessitating its total reconstruction. The only way this could be done would be by moving it east. It would thus consume the site of Tower Gateway. The other argument was mathematical. 10% of passengers use Tower Gateway, but 25% of trains have to call there. By closing Towie G, 100% of passengers and 100% of trains would go to Bank. Numbers of trains could potentially be increased without having to pick their way around the services from T-gates. It is debatable how likely this all is to go ahead now. Travel and work patterns changed dramatically in 2020, what with the pandemic and all. And it may well be the case that they continue to change, in which case all bets could be off. Plus, the current economic climate and all that. There are a number of historical echoes, ironies perhaps, with this plan. The original Minories station was closed because Fenchurch Street opened, and now it seems that the new Minories station will be closed because of the new Fenchurch Street. The DLR will not get the Fenchurch Street terminus first mooted, but Fenchurch Street will go on top of the terminus they did get. And finally, Tower Gateway would be replaced with a new interchange between the Bank branch and Tower Hill, which of course is another of those things that they originally wanted. I guess it's like the Rolling Stones once sang, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might find that the prevailing economics and thus commuting patterns of East London change dramatically and a version of what you wanted becomes desirable." I seem to recall that's the lyric. It's a while since I've heard that song. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please click the like button to show your appreciation if you did, and you may wish to subscribe for more. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your always generous support. You are the concrete extension to my brick viaduct. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.